Hey everyone, hope you're all doing okay. Before we begin this video, I just want to say that most of these stories aren't completely terrifying, but mainly just creepy encounters. I still think they're all very scary in their own right, so I hope you enjoy. Let's begin. Alright, so this was a while ago. My elementary school was giant, but all of it was gated off. The only ways out were through the main office, and if you were really crafty, the bus gates, which were 6 feet tall. Also, this will be handy later on. We all had to wear IDs with our name and picture on them. I was a relatively trusted kid, so during my journalism periods, I could go around wherever and take pictures. So I left one time with my camera, held a snake, climbed a tree, did 5th grader things. So I was at the top of the tree, which is right by the bus gates. You could get a pretty good view of them, and I decided to take a picture. While I was focusing it, I noticed this guy was climbing over the fence, so I took a picture of him. Maybe he had supersonic hearing or something, I don't know. But when the shutter clicked, he stopped climbing over, looked up, and stared directly at me. Since the tree was mostly dead and in the middle of fall, he could see my main features. I didn't move, and he just went back on the other side of the fence. It had loopholes, so he didn't jump, just sorta climbed, and walked off. Fast forward to like a year later, and they had middle school there too, all in one, I know. So I was still trusted, somehow. So I went to the front of the office to see if I could get some shots of the logo. And I saw this guy that sort of looked like the man a year ago, and he was trying to get a visitor pass. So he looked over the main lady's shoulder and saw me with my name tag and said, "Oh, it's her. Hey sweetie, your Uncle Robbie is here." Now, the main lady is generally a paranoid lady, and I think she knew me pretty well. I don't have an Uncle Robbie, if you couldn't tell, because she immediately kicked him out. Thank God for her. That would have been terrifying. Uncle Robbie, let's not ever meet again. This happened 2 years ago at my high school, which shall not be named. Yesterday, in my chemistry class, the teacher was talking about it, and it gave me chills. I go to a medium-sized school, about 400 students per class. However, we only have about 100 students enrolled in AP Physics every year, so we only have one teacher for the subject. The longtime physics teacher retired, so the school board hired, we will call him Mr. Sykes. Anyways, from the first day of school, everyone could tell he was, well, different. He would blow up over the smallest things, such as someone writing a formula wrong. Just go absolutely ballistic. The first week of school, he made over 5 students cry because of his outburst. My chemistry teacher is the science department leader, so she was very disturbed by these actions. One day, she was going to talk to him about this, and if he needs to make some changes or the students needed remediation. He was not in his room, but she found a pillow and a sleeping bag and some of his clothes hanging in the teacher locker room. This seemed a little suspicious, but she did not overthink it and forgot about it. Fast forward to December. My teacher's son was in the marching band for school, and she had to pick him up around 11 p.m. due to a game very far away. She noticed his car was still there. This made her grow more suspicious, because really, what teacher would be there at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night? As the following week went on, Mr. Sykes' outbursts got worse, and the students began to fear him more. The following Saturday, my teacher's kids were sick with a stomach bug, so she went to good old Walmart for some ginger ale, and on the way home, she decided to drive by the school to see if Mr. Sykes' car was still there. Sure enough, it was. The following week, the physics students were notified that Mr. Sykes would be leaving that week, and they could either drop the class without a penalty or take it online. The first day of Christmas break, the janitor who was cleaning the school texted my teacher and said Mr. Sykes was standing in his empty classroom staring at the wall. She said if he was still there when he left, to call the principals and possibly the police. He was there 5 hours later, staring at the wall. My principals and the police had to end up coming, and escorting him out. A week later, my teacher was checking the supplies in the room, making sure everything was okay for write-up. As she was going through his drawers, she found various items such as razors, rat poison, and acids. Who knows what he was planning to do with them? So, Mr. Sykes, let's never meet again. So, when I was a senior in high school, this would have been 2007, I was out of the blue contacted one day by this random guy on MySpace. I vaguely recognized him, but didn't know him. He told me that he knew me from school, and that I had tutored him in math a couple of times. This should have been my first red flag that something was off. I hate math, and I've never tutored anyone in it. I told him he was mistaken, but I tried to be nice to him, and we struck up a friendly conversation. Soon, the guy, Brian, started to talk to me at school. It started off pretty innocently. He was giving me more attention than I wanted from him. But I was flattered, and didn't think anything of it at the time. He was a couple of years younger than me, and I figured he had developed a crush on me, primarily because we were both kind of odd compared to the other kids in our high school. It was a very small school. My graduating class was about 40 people, and he and I were two of a very small number of alternative kids there. He was pretty emo, while I tended to lean more towards punk. Both of us loved My Chemical Romance. I figured he was just into me because there weren't many other girls with similar interest. Before long, he started waiting for me at my locker. Every day, between every class, he started following me around before school and during lunch. He started coming to my performances. I was in drama and choir. I tried to be polite but started avoiding him. I would go to the local grocery store to eat lunch, even though it was more expensive, because underclassmen weren't allowed to leave the campus. The situation continued to escalate to the point where he was sexually harassing me every chance I failed to avoid him. If he was waiting for me at my locker, he would say sexually explicit things to me, tell me what he wanted to do to me, and tell me that when he was having sex with his girlfriend, he wished she was me. At homecoming, he left his girlfriend waiting awkwardly while he came to tell me that he really wanted us to all have a threesome. Luckily, my girlfriends were with me and came over as soon as they noticed him talking to me, which made him scurry away. As quickly as it started, it was over. One day he stopped showing up at school. I was relieved, but curious. After about a month of him being gone, my friend mentioned him in front of my dad, who was also the principal of my high school. My dad questioned me about what happened, and I ended up telling him the whole story. He seemed really troubled. I asked him what was wrong, and he told me why Brian had been absent from school recently. Apparently, not long after homecoming, Brian had strapped some fireworks to a cat and set them off. The cat exploded, and Brian laughed. He got caught and sent to kitty jail, and was committed to a psychiatric facility by his parents after he was released. I don't know what happened to him after that. I'm thinking I dodged a bullet though, because he turned out to be even crazier than I thought he was. Okay, so when I was younger, me and my sister went to this big, old school named Shannon Park. We were around 10 to 12 years old when we were spending our time in the school, having only spent around 3 years there since me and my family were moving around a lot. Anyway, what made the school scary was that it was surrounded by old abandoned apartment buildings, which were fenced off, and everyone knew the military used the building before. Some marks still left behind, but mostly cleaned up to be more child-friendly. Inside the school was a bit unnerving. It was always freezing, and there were some doors that not even the staff knew where they led, including a door that stood halfway up the staircase and was a bit off the floor. I've seen kids trying to get in, but the door was always locked. Slowly over the course of the year, teachers and students were questioning about this door, and the principal soon gathered us together in the gym to discuss it. Instead of straight up telling us what was there, he made it a contest to guess what it was. As kids, we didn't mind this, and each class got a chance to guess what it was over the course of a month. At the end of said month, we were gathered again in the gym to be told what it was. A teacher turned on the projector and showed pictures of the door, the second picture of the lock being removed, and the third of what was inside. There was a small, dark hole in the floor, looking around the size of a manhole. Peering down further showed that the hole went way down, way far down. There was a ladder to climb down, but it was rusty and looked like the screws keeping it in place would just pop out at any given time. The photographer did, however, climb down that hole and show us pictures of what they found. Caves. Long, narrow caves that spread for quite a while. They didn't go through the caves just then, but did start another contest as to what could be in the caves. Honestly, at that point, I was unnerved, knowing that there were caves that not even the teachers were sure about underneath an innocent elementary school was sure as hell creepy. But we held the contest again, and classes guessed what could be in the tunnels. We waited and never got an answer. Close to the end of the year, the principal told us he was moving to a different school. A few teachers did the same. We were confused, since the principal was not at the school for too long in the first place, though the teachers had been there for a while. Of course, rumors started to spread, and soon a teacher came forward in our class. The teacher talked about how the school used to be used by some sort of military, but the use was dropped after the Halifax explosion. Since the building was so close to the harbor, it had taken a great deal of damage, but the structure had held enough to fix it up and make it a school. The teacher told us that the tunnels were probably used to navigate under the city in case of dangers like the Halifax explosion, and that the apartment buildings were going to be in use again after the explosion, but the damage was too heavy, so they dropped the project and just cleaned up somewhat. The reason they hadn't shown the tunnels was probably that there was either nothing to see or something that we shouldn't have seen. I was a bit skeptical on that, seeing as the teacher was one for conspiracy theories, but that doesn't mean I wasn't terrified. Thankfully, I moved to a different area at the starting of the next school year. It's been years since I've been to the school, but the kids I babysit go there. I'm totally into history and ghosts and whatnot, so now I'd love to go back and see the tunnels myself. Obviously, that's probably not going to happen, but just knowing about those tunnels makes me both scared and excited. Halifax is rich with history and such, so I'm wondering how these tunnels could fit in our history. I also decided to do a bit of research, and it turns out that there are other areas of the city with recently discovered tunnels that led to Citadel Hill, a big place in the middle of town with preserved artifacts from wars and coast defenses. And they said there's a lot more tunnels that they haven't been through or found. Chances are, the tunnels under the school could have been used for food transportation or other stuff. I went to school with a murderer. When I was in elementary school, one of the boys a few grades ahead of me was Kyle Dube. I was 2 or 3 grades below him, so I didn't have much contact with him outside of recess. In the 4-square line, he often made it a point to stand right behind me and yank on my pigtails as hard as he could, whipping them around under the pretense that I was a horse, and he was riding me. He also used to bring knives to school, and would sometimes threaten some of his classmates with them when they did something to make him angry. And at one point, he actually pulled one on a girl after school out behind the school. Why nothing was officially done about it, I don't know, but my school, being very small, was not known for being on top of the disciplinary side of things. There were a number of small things, the hair pulling, and just the general way he acted, that led to me being uncomfortable whenever he was around. I wasn't alone in this regard. Former classmates have also expressed feelings of uneasiness in his presence. To my relief, he ended up moving away, and none of us heard anything from or about him for a number of years. Until one day, he shows up in the local news, having been arrested for the murder of Nicole Cable. He made a fake Facebook profile, lured her out of her house, kidnapped her, duct taped her, and left her in the back of his dad's pickup truck. His intentions was to pretend to find her and be the hero. When he went back and found that she was dead, he dumped her body in the woods and covered it in sticks. They found her about a week later. I was in school when I read the article, and I had to go to the nurse's office because I felt so weak, sick, and shaky. It's very disconcerting to think a murderer used to yank on my hair. He's going on trial in the next couple of days, which is what made me think of it. So to end this like everyone else does, Kyle Dube, let's not meet again. I am telling the story for the first time, and I have never told it to anyone before, not even my parents, as it would have freaked them out. This happened 40 years ago, when I was 5, so I didn't understand the danger. I just thought he was a very nice man. We lived in a small seaside town. I was in kindergarten, and my school was about 5 blocks from our house. Back then, all the little kids played outside, and yes, even walked to school by themselves, or with friends. As I remember, you were not allowed to ride your bike to school until you were in the 1st grade. That was the school rule, and I have no idea why, but whatever. My school had 2 kindergarten sessions, and I went to the morning to about noon class every day. One day after class, I went out to the buses to look for my friend Jimmy, but the buses were just pulling away. A blonde-haired man came up to me and said that my mother asked him to give me a ride. I remember he also had tan pants on. I can't recall his face, but he was just average. That's all I can say. We got into his little car, and thinking back for so long, I remember it being a tiny little Datsun, or maybe a Toyota 2-door. He took me to Dairy Queen. Being from a large family that couldn't afford to go out to eat, I was very excited. I even recall looking across the car at the lady in the drive-thru, anticipating my ice cream cone. When the man in the car handed me my ice cream cone, he said in a kid-type voice, "One for you, and one for me." We sat in the parking lot finishing our cones. Then, he dropped me off at the dry cleaners near the school, and I walked home. Thinking back, I don't know what his intentions were. He did ask me some mundane questions, one being if I had a dog, and stuff like that. I would like to think he was some guy whose son had died, but the opposite is probably true, that he was a perv who lost his nerve to harm me. In my late 20s, I once went back to that town and walked into the police station. The police chief was there. He was this typical, crusty around the edges, southern accent police chief. He didn't know of any old crimes on kids. All he kept repeating was, "Are you shitting me?"